Okay, guys, we're live. Thank you for coming to the first B1 Contributor Hours. Today, we're going to start with the new agenda system. Pierre submitted an item called Trustless Fisherman, for which he's going to be doing a presentation. Both video and audio are being recorded, so it can be consumed later. Yeah, Pierre, go ahead, take it away.
Okay, cool. Um, so one of the big things about V1 is trying to get trustless fishermen, or else be sort of having the risk of having like a gateway V2, which we really don't want. So I've been thinking about it for the past couple days, and I think that I might have a sort of model. It's just something I thought of. There's no specifics yet, but it is just something that I thought of recently, so I decided to share it. So the first step of having these trustless fisher, it's a whole new incentive model and sampling protocol. So the first thing that happened is there need to be a fisherman session. And that basically means every so often period of time, which would be determined by a VRF, a fisherman would initiate a fisherman session and pull in some random fishermen, which were selected from the VRF. And then once they have these random fishermen, keep in mind they're all incentivized to complete as they get more rewards for the more sessions that they would partake in. And so these fishermen then move on to the next stage, which is the benchmarking. So based on an NTP protocol where they're all time synced, the original fishermen would figure a time, and then they would all send requests to the service nodes at that period of time to benchmark them. And then afterwards, they would report all their test scores to the init transaction on that block. And in the test score, they'd have the fisherman session, which would correspond to all the nodes in the session as well as what time that benchmark happened. And so let's say there's an inactive. Okay, so now here's the grading period. This is probably the one that's most likely going to change the most. So these, if you notice, there's two fishermen that submitted pause TXs, one fisherman who didn't, and one fisherman who didn't submit anything. So because this fisherman didn't participate, its reputation and stake is penalized with a burn, which is a network parameter. Now these two fishermen would both be rewarded. So the grading process is really based on the reputation of each fisherman, and the reputation of each fisherman changes over time depending on how close its test scores are to the other fishermen. So it's similar to Chainlink, where the closer that they are to the other nodes, one, the more reputation they have, and two, their impact on a service node's report card is bigger. So the more accurate that you are, one, the more rewards you get, and two, the bigger impact that you have on a service node's salary. So these two now another thing that can't be completely done like this is the pause transactions. So to determine whether a pause transaction is actually valid, they just pick whether the majority of active fishermen submitted a pause transaction or didn't, and depending on that, the fisherman's reputation is also rewarded or punished if they did or didn't submit a pause transaction with the rest of the fishermen. So the service node that these two accorded to would be paused as the consensus of fishermen submitted a pause transaction. And so now there's the fisherman rewarding system, where so after the fisherman's reputation is changed during the grading period, there's the fisherman rewards, and they all go through this reputation to salary, where they get the max salary, and then that's multiplied by the reputation to salary, which is a curve that'll be a network parameter that's customizable, so you can determine exactly how you want the fisherman to be incentivized, and then they'll get rewarded as such. So that's pretty much the whole system there. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about it. I think that trustless fishermen are possible with a system like this, but I might be overlooking something.
Can I ask a clarifying question? At the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned something about Gateway B2. Can you clarify that? What did you mean?
Well, like the whole point of V1 is that, I mean, having the fisherman is definitely a step up above the gateway, but having
in the QoS sense is what you mean, like measuring QoS, because you know
measuring measuring.
Go ahead.
You could okay, yeah, it's definitely a step up in terms of like measuring the quality of service of nodes, and also from like an accuracy standpoint. But there's still a lot of centralization with the fisherman right now. I mean, yes, it's governed by the DAO, but we all know that that fisherman's probably going to be run by PNF. And so another step up above fishermen is to have fully trustless fishermen. And so that's why I think that that's really important.
Yeah, I just don't want to conflate the fact that like the gateway, the portal API actually is a developer experience also thing for applications. Uh, so I just want I wanted to make clear that one thing doesn't solve the other. I agree with you. There's a better way of measuring quality of service, but just wanted to make sure that for people listening, they know that we're talking about that aspect.
For some additional context, so Ben Van, who's also on the call, myself and Pierre have had a few back and forths on the protocol GitHub repo, where we did discuss the potential gamification of the fisherman's QoS from the service node perspective, which we kind of deemed as madman, very unlikely or unprofitable madman attacks.
Well,
There's some, though it's arguable, but it's. I'm just trying to provide additional context for those listening that it is a potential attack. The thread is going on there, but I think the proposal here is being able to avoid that altogether if possible.
Yeah, and I didn't mention this in the quick presentation, but this also makes only having one fisherman. In my opinion, it's like, for anyone that's sophisticated, it's literally trivial, at least with the current system, to game the gateway and figure out what its IP is or the consistent sampling delay. Like literally a trivial. All you do is you just provide the fisherman with your own application key, and then the second you receive, you don't send any requests to that application yourself. And then the second you see a request, a relay come in from from anyone with that application key, you know that the sender of it is the fisherman. And then from there, it's trivial to dox all other IPs except for that IP from sending things. So this also makes this a lot harder to do, because now there's going to be way more fishermen. And with these way more fishermen, it's just going to be more complex moving parts. There's going to be fisherman sessions, which are determined randomly, judging by the initial seed of the fisherman plus the index. So it'll be like random intervals this fisherman session will happen. So yeah, that also solves the sampling protocol problem.
I have a question.
Okay, so I just want
to. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, could I actually? Luis, let me know if there's something you want to ask first, because what I wanted to say was, like, at a holistic perspective, the diagram we're all looking at, this is really, really helpful and really, really good. As we were going through like every single step, I do feel that we went by a little quickly, and I still don't have a good understanding. I'm still missing a few points and how they connect in the overall picture. So I was actually hoping to maybe go through each of these pillars kind of step by step and dive in to get a full understanding. So I guess my question is going to be pretty big. So Luis, if you think that'll help what you wanted to ask,
no,
we can go with that approach, or you can come first.
I actually think that helps. So why don't we do that?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Pierre.
Okay.
Kind of the intro you gave, I think you have a really good overall picture. But for those that like haven't been thinking about it, I think it's hard to grasp how everything connects.
Okay.
So
yeah, okay, I'll go. Okay, yeah. So the fisherman session. Okay, so the fisherman session. Okay, so the fisherman session will be generated every. There'll be a network parameter that's the minimum session delay or something like that, and after this minimum session delay elapses, there will be the fisherman. Here, we'll just do this. Okay, so after the previous session, there'll be the minimum session delay, and the next session, or here there'll be. So then after this, the fisherman that's going to start a new session, there'll be a VRF. And I haven't fully thought this out, but there'll need to be some random number generated. I think that it should be generated via the number. So it'd be the VRF of the private and then the number of sessions that it's already done.
So we just need, I think we don't have to specify how it is. We just need a reliable deterministic source of entropy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's
exactly.
a VRF. Yeah. So yeah, I think like for the purpose of this discussion, just like deterministic entropy is all we really need.
Cool. Okay, so then after this, then there's the deterministic entropy, which is a delay. And then after this, then there's a deterministic fisherman selection. But it's random. So then it'll do this. It'll find all the other fishermen that belong in the session, and then it'll send some message to them. I mean, I don't really know exactly what the message will be, but it'll send a message to them being like, here's the session, you're participating. I haven't fully thought out whether it's going to be voluntary participation based on economic incentive, like because if the fishermen participate in more sessions, they would get rewarded more, or it's going to be forced participation, and if they don't participate, then they get burned. But it'll be one of the two. It'll communicate to the other fishermen created by this deterministic fisherman selection, and it'll be like, you're part of this session now. And so that's how the fisherman session is created. Now, keep in time, there's going to be like probably hundreds of these parallel processes running by all the other fishermen. And this goes part of why I was saying that with this new model, it'll literally be impossible to gamify the fishermen, as there's going to be hundreds of all of these going on, and no service node is going to be able to keep up with that and how fast they're going.
So to summarize this, is it fair to say that kind of like how in V0 we select service nodes for a session using something that's random but also deterministic, including the previous block cache, we're doing the same thing for fishermen in V1 to have a pool of fishermen for every single.
Yeah. Okay. Although it wouldn't be a block cache, it would be like probably some like internal thing, like maybe a VRF or something. Because I imagine that these sessions will be happening like very, very often. Oh, I forgot to mention another thing. There's going to be this deterministic, and there's also going to be another random thing, which is what service node session it's going to be querying.
So that was gonna be my question. Like, why are these two parallel sessions? If a fisherman session is already tied to a service session, why isn't there just one session with fishermen and servicers? And use the same random entropy that you use for one, use it in both, just select from two different lists.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's going to be that. There's going to be the list of fishermen and then a list of service node sessions. And just kind of like, I see what you mean. Oh, the reason I did that is because I feel like doing it like this would be able to, you could have more of them. So it's just and it's also
Sorry,
more random.
I didn't catch that. What did you
Hold on,
mean?
could you repeat your question?
Yeah, my question was, why do you have a separate session? Why can't you just do it? Why can't you select the fisherman as part of the service session? Now you have a service session and a fisherman session, whereas in the current spec you have different
Because
sessions.
I did this because it's more random to make it even harder to gamify it.
Why don't we make it more random for both and do one session selection where you can select whatever amount of fishermen you want and whatever amount of servicers you want based on protocol rules.
I mean, isn't this very? I don't see the difference between that and this. I mean, there's a fisherman that's getting their session.
There's a side effect because now, yeah, I know where you're going, Daniel. There's a side effect. It might be too much into the implementation, but there is a side effect to having to track which fisherman session belongs to which service session, and then now you have two sources of entropy. Which, if you're right, and this is more random, then both servicing and fisherman sessions will benefit from having that increase in randomness. So that's why I'm wondering why there needs, if there was any additional security properties to separating the two sessions.
Well, if the
yeah, let me jump in. So, Luis, I see where you're going with this. So I think there's definitely, the benefit of decoupling fisherman sessions from service node sessions so that they can have their own properties, such as a single service node session will have 60 minutes, or we want to, for example, rotate a fisherman every 1 minute, maybe for additional security or for different protocol level properties. So I think this is one of those things that we can kind of argue both ways, and there's trade-offs. But Pierre, I think that since we're building an L1 blockchain here, and we really have to be cognizant of how much how much memory the state takes up, and we really want to keep it as simple as possible, maybe just for the purpose of continuing to the next part, let's assume that there's, well, let me know if you think this is a fair assumption. Like if we were to assume that in a single session, we use the same source of entropy to select some number of service nodes, some number of fishermen, and have one session for the two of them, just for the purpose of simplicity, which can be decoupled later, I think we can still solve the trustless fisherman problem, but potentially with less bonuses down the road.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I guess just for this call, we'll assume there's random fishermen who are in a random session with connected to a service node session. Okay, so yeah, we can figure exactly how we want to go about that later. That was just my initial take. Okay, so now we're moving on to the next stage, which is node benchmarking. Hey Adi, can you mute? Okay, so Daniel, I was talking to Daniel and he mentioned that all the fishermen and service nodes were synced on some NTP time protocol. And so for the benchmarking, we can't have the fishermen query the service nodes at staggered intervals, or else, let's say a fisherman queries a service node at X and then another fisherman queries it at Y, and in between X and Y, the service node goes down or crashes, then one of the fishermen is going to get severely punished even though it didn't do anything wrong. So that's why we have to time sync all the fishermen to query all the service nodes at the same period of time. And so again, with this service node, I assume that there'll be some timestamp in the relay or anything, so the fishermen can prove that they did query the service nodes at this period of time. And they will obviously store this information in their cache, which will then move on to, they'll publish it. Is there any questions about the node benchmarking session?
I actually do have a question. So I think what you're saying about the timing of the sampling for servicers, especially in a scenario where you have multiple fishermen, it's important. Couldn't you just introduce and like using the same seed of entropy that you use for selection? You could use that same seed of entropy, add one additional input that is unique to every fisherman, and determine a random delay that is unique to that fisherman. So that way, each fisherman has a unique delay of sampling, and that way, the fisherman will never send sample requests at the same time. And that way, you don't have to. I think that would make the coordination easier, and that way, every fisherman can be independent of each other in how they actually uh, time their sampling.
Yeah, I thought about that. That's one way to go about it. But I said it like, I'm not sure how. Here, I'll just do this. Okay, so let's say we have like a timeline, okay? And let's say at this point in time here, this is like the timeline of the session or whatever. One of the nodes, let's just say fisherman 1 queries service nodes. Okay, and then at another random interval of time, we have the fisherman 2 queries the service nodes. And let's say in between this period of time, the service node crashes, okay? So this fisherman right here is going to report a test score as usual. Then the service node crashes, and when fisherman 2 receives no response from the service node, it's going to initiate a pause service node transaction. And as I mentioned in the later parts, during the grading period, if a fisherman sends a pause service node transaction and all the other fishermen don't, the fisherman that sent that transaction is going to be punished because it didn't remain in consensus with the rest of the nodes. So that's why I thought that it would be best to have them all query at the same time to avoid that risk.
But the problem with querying at the same time is that you can more easily establish a pattern of fisherman sampling as a service node. And I feel like this actually has an interesting property because it makes it so that one fisherman doesn't detect the crash because their sampling period has not yet elapsed. The next one, and you're going to be able to detect this inavailability of services faster, and that's a benefit in quality of service for the application. I do understand the reward thing because they have to be in consensus of why they sent the post transaction, but I think it's a nice property nonetheless.
Regarding the gamificate, like, so you're worried somewhat that if they all send at the same time, they'll be able to find out when the fishermen are sending it?
No, not one. You're gonna be able to send to know. Like it's gonna be two. Like if you look at production traffic in any Web2 application, you're gonna notice that traffic tends to be more erratic in the flow of requests. If within that you can find patterns of this group of clients are sending the same. They're sending samples in the same intervals. Now you can more easily establish a pattern, I think.
Yeah, well, another thing I see what you mean. So yeah, I guess it would be possible to dox it, judging if all the fishermen send it at the same time. So yeah, actually you're right. There might have to be some staggering or some randomness. But another thing, there's not going to be there's going to be a random sampling delay. Like, it's not going to, like, all the fishermen send it every 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 seconds. There'd be another source of entropy. It's like all the fishermen send at 10 seconds, 3 seconds, 7 seconds, etc. But I do see what you mean with them being able to identify the fishermen IPs as they're all sending at the same time. So yeah, there might have to be some stagger or some randomness. So yeah.
Yeah, Daniel, go ahead. I'm gonna be just to take 1 second for the format. I'm gonna be monitoring the voice channel text chat. If you wanna ask a question or something, feel free to send the raise hand emoji, and we can moderate that way. So that way we're not speaking on top of each other. So Daniel, go ahead.
Cool, thank you. So this will be a pretty small clarification question, but Pierre, so between Fisherman 1 and Fisherman 2, setting their course of the service node, you show a service node crashes, and that causes Fisherman 2 to then send a pause service node message. And in kind of even before we were talking about the staggering, were you assuming that a single failed request like this will trigger a fisherman to pause a service node, or at least is some minimum threshold supposed to be passed?
I mean, this was for like an example. I'm sure that it's probably going to be more redundant than that, but I'm just showing that even if it doesn't, let's say like the service node, like let's just say like the load balancer gets really slammed in between this period of time, then Fisherman 2 is going to query the service node, and they're just going to submit something different in the test score than the other fishermen, and in the grading period, the fishermen are going to get wrecked because of that. So that's why. Although, yeah, I think that there will have to be some small sampling, and we're just gonna have to hope that the service nodes don't crash in that small period of time, which is pretty unlikely. So, yeah, I think that's
Yeah, probably an open question that we don't have to discuss right now, but something that we definitely have to figure out in the protocol is how many nines need between the fisherman and the servicer before a fisherman pauses a servicer. Because nothing is. So yeah, so it's kind of like put a stake in that. That is something we need to figure out, and kind of move on to the next piece.
Okay, cool. So now here's the test. Okay, so after the fishermen benchmark everything else, they're gonna go to they're all gonna report their test scores to the network, and in the test score, I haven't like fully thought about all the information that needs to be in the test score, but there'll need to be information about the fisherman session or like some ID or something to verify what session ID these test scores should go in. And then there'll be the data as well. This is very similar to the current one, but there'll probably need to be some modification to talk about what session the fisherman is in.
I have a sorry, I didn't use the raise hand. I have a question regarding that. Have you thought about comparing the results of the fishermen? How will that go down?
Yeah, that goes down. Oh yeah, so I don't know why I didn't write this down anywhere, but after each service node has a report card, and so the test score, when it goes on that report card, there's going to be another column, which is the reputation of the test score at the time of so at the time that the test score was submitted, what was the reputation of the fisherman? And there's going to be, as the fisherman's reputation gets lower, the impact on its report card and salary is going to decrease. And if the fisherman's reputation is super high and it gives a shitty report to the service node, then it's going to have a really big impact on the service node. So that's how we prevent like a malicious fisherman from going and just like keep like unstaking and restaking to screw over service nodes.
Yeah, that's good, all good and fine. My question is, if I submit, if Fisherman 1 submits a score of A to Service Node 1 and Fisherman 2 submits a score of D, like summarizing, right? Like I know it's a more detailed it's more detailed to get to the but thinking about a grade system, if someone submits a D and someone submits an A, who does the network believe, or do they just impact the score equally, like based on their reputation? It's like if I have a better reputation as a fisherman, then I impact that service node score to let's say it's a 5 fisherman session. I impacted 25%. But if I have a lesser score, then my other fisherman's opinion on that service node actually matter more.
Yeah, it would
And then,
impact the service.
sorry, go ahead.
Continue.
No, no, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, it would impact. It would impact the service node based on the reputation of the fisherman. So if a fisherman has a high reputation, for example, if a fisherman's reputation is like, there's going to be this curve here to determine the reputation as salary, and there'll be another one for the reputation to impact. So we can like really customize it. But for example, if the fisherman, let's just use this as an example. If the fisherman's reputation is 0.5, then its test score's impact will be the test score and then multiplied by 0.5 versus if the fisherman's reputation it's 1, its impact is going to be 2 times as great as if its reputation was 0.5.
Well, let me ask you a question then. What incentivizes? Well, what if I just submit null scores for every session? Like I don't know even if this is an attack, but if I'm a fisherman and I don't do any work, I just submit a test score full of null proofs, saying this node was offline all the time, and then the other fisherman. And I'm a high reputation fisherman, and the other ones submit other things. Who's telling the truth?
Well, here you're kind of really using the economic incentive, because if you're a high reputation fisherman and you keep submitting shitty reports, then not only is your reputation going to go down, but once it goes past the reputation cliff, you're going to start getting burned.
You said the keyword. Sorry. Before you carry on. Parentheses, you said the keyword, shitty reports. Who determines who has the accurate report or the shitty report?
It's the consensus. So you'll get all the test scores, and then I talked about this yesterday. It'll be some like the test score will be like a Z-score combined with the reputation of the fisherman. So it'll be like, I haven't completely thought of the algorithm, but it'll be like, for example, let's just say it's the median, but then it's like it's a Z-score, but the fisherman's reputation is included in the calculation. I haven't exactly thought about the algorithm, but it's kind of what sort of the average of what all the fishermen think.
Yeah, the median of what every fisher. I understand why the median and not the average. And then you might also want to take a look, because we had this discussion when we were talking about B0 quality of service. You might also want to take a look at the variance, because what bad actors are going to do is they're going to hide in the variance, in the realm of the variance where they are not too far away from the median, but they will find a way to game the system to be as close to the median as possible, and either avoid doing work or either falsify their reports. But I think that should go in that direction. But the problem then is going to be proving, like even the median could be gained over time, but that's for when we determine maybe what algorithm goes there. Daniel, go ahead. You raised your hand.
Yeah, so for the math part, kind of like we did in a few other topics earlier, where we mentioned some sort of trade-offs need to be made and some sort of algorithm will be in place. I think we can, let's assume there is a function here, but what I wanted to add regarding the discussion between variance and means and all these other things, I think that in a normal world, no, that's actually, I take that back. Assuming that all protocol level actors are honest, the test scores of the fishermen will probably follow a normal distribution, kind of like everything else. There's going to be a big mean and then some variance due to random delays that we can't foresee. So what the Z-score, for those that aren't familiar, actually does is it takes the value of any single point, subtracts the mean, and divides it by the variance. And obviously the variance takes the median into account. So it's pretty common in quantitative analytics that could potentially be more comprehensive than just the median or just an average or just the variance, like taking them all in place. So I personally would be a fan of using something like Z-score, but we'd have to evaluate it if we do decide to implement it at the protocol level. But really, any function, I think, can do here.
Yeah, I see what Luis was saying. Like, it doesn't, it's not like to the, see, that's one of the things that I can't model out because there's too many unknown network parameters. I would say that this whole system would be a toggle or a parameter, whether it's enabled or not. And then we'd have to make the decision whether to enable this. Because there's just, I tried to model it, but there's just so many things on the network. For example, yeah, it's hard. But I think that it's possible. I haven't fully modeled out, so I can't give you a conclusive answer, Luis. But we'll just have to see once everything progresses.
We're not fishing for conclusive answers. We're trying to digest your idea better. And that's why maybe the rollout. I like the way you frame it, where you said it could be a toggle. Maybe. I want conclusive answer. Maybe it could be a toggle, and that's why the rollout strategy for Fisherman is important. And that's why, like in the original plan, trustless Fisherman was the one furthest out, because it could be something where we could implement it without being completely sure of the characteristics, and then maybe make it so that it's only used for gathering data. At on-chain data that you can gather, and once there's enough on-chain data indicating that the system is secure, then you could go ahead and go to the DAO and be like, turn on the switch, right? These are implementation things that are more tactical on how we roll Fisherman out, that could also help this idea come to fruition. Sorry, Daniel, go ahead. You want conclusive things?
It's just a joke. Continue.
It's definitely not going to be like, it's hard to say now, but I figured it's probably better to build it in now as a toggle versus having to build it out once everything's already done. Because like I've made this analogy before, but right now the V1 development and spec is like an infant's brain. It's like moldable. But once it grows up, it's going to be a lot harder to mold. And so that's why I figured we might as well just build in this functionality now.
Yeah, that's a good observation. It happened with a lot of V0 features that were built in and not active, right? So yeah, I understand where you're coming from, for sure.
And we do have feature switches in one of the recent releases. We added feature switches in V0. We should definitely start having that since day one in V1 with all the toggles. And for those that look through a code base, there's already a bunch of different governance parameters that we're adding in, but definitely no reason not to add more so we get this optionality.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so then there's the grading period. So this is basically just the impact on the reputation of each fisherman based on the distance from the Z-score or whatever algorithm we end up using. And then that impacts its thing. And then there'll be some other network parameters for like if it doesn't participate, how much does it get burnt, and stuff like that. This is just kind of like, this is just going to be like the main grading algorithm. It's probably going to be pretty similar to Chainlink. And I don't really have exactly how this part is going to work, but it's going to be the farther away it is from consensus, the more negative impact it's going to have on its reputation. And
so the report. Sorry, go ahead.
You said similar to Chainlink. Could you provide more context on what you meant?
Well, I know that I did a little bit of research. I'm not too familiar with Chainlink, but in the research I did do, I know that there's like that that the system is very similar to this, whereas it's like the data, and it makes sense that it's similar as they're both kind of functioning the same thing, putting off-chain data on-chain. And so it's similar because I don't know the exact thing, but it's basically like if a Chainlink node like gives a price that's very far away from all the other prices, then it gets slashed and it doesn't get any rewards for that period of time. So that's what I mean by that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay, so then on the last stage, the Fisherman Rewards is probably the simplest. The network's going to get the max salary, and then it's very similar to the service nodes rewarding, where it's reputation. It's like the service node reputation. Any missing will just get burnt, and then it'll get the remainder. So another reason why I added this chart here. So an interesting thing that we can do is if we make this chart like y equals, I think it's just like, yeah, y equals 1. It'll just be a flat line at 1. And so that could be an additional toggle if we want this or not. So if we're still in that stage where the DAO is choosing Fisherman and we want them all to have the same rewards, we would just make this slope y equals 1, and then they'd all get rewarded the same. And then this slope, I think I don't know how many, like, it'll be a customizable function, which I think could be kind of cool. It'll give us a lot of adjustment on exactly how we want the fishermen to be rewarded, depending on the economic situation of the network. And I think that pretty much sums up my system.
If I could chime in, something that I think could be interesting here is to have a curve that is malleable by parameters, just like PIP 22 in the last amendment does, where you can have a softer curve and maybe this is something to consider. It's like maybe in a world with trustless fishermen, you want fishermen who can be differently staked, where you have a minimum floor and then different fishermen stake differently, and you could have a curve that basically rewards or impacts both their reputation and their salary based on how much they are staked. But maybe that's too much of a rabbit hole. It's just an idea that came from the top of my mind when I saw the reputation to salary curve. So
yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, for sure.
So, because that removes tokens from the... Go ahead. Who was talking?
Someone? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Me, I was off mute by accident.
No worries. So that could be one thing that could be done, where if your higher stake is like a high risk, high reward scenario, where if you deviate from the thing, whenever you're slashed, then now you're burned more severely, right? And then on the other end, because fishermen affect two things, like their output and test scores affects the grade for the servicer, and it affects their own reputation as a fisherman. So I think that could be a system that makes sense, but just something that came from the top of my head.
Yeah, that's definitely, for sure. So I think
sorry,
Daniel raised his hand. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I just kind of to double down on the idea that you just proposed. In a lot of different social networks nowadays, there's the whole discussion of bring your own algorithm for your feed. And given how the modules are structured in V1, where we kind of have a main bus and we can mock and inject, so kind of like dependency injection, different types of modules, we could even experiment or let the community work on bring your own test score algorithm. And just kind of, there's a lot of open questions here around how it would be implemented, whether it gets A/B tested or just gets deployed. But bring your own test score or bring your own test score algorithm module could be something that we could do. And I think it'll also enable the community to participate in all these different variations of how salaries are distributed. Just wanted to double down on the idea as a plus one.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be. I think that there's a lot of knobs and a lot of functions that I haven't talked about here, and yeah, I don't really know too many of them, so you're probably going to have to help me out with that. But yeah, I think that this might be like one of the most customizable models of the network, so I think that that'll be pretty cool.
Cool. Awesome. Anyone else has any other questions or comments for Pierre on his topic? Awesome. We're almost on time. Thank you, Pierre, for presenting this. Really interesting. I see Sean typing, Van Ban typing on the. Oh, there you go. Sean, go ahead.
Sorry about that. It takes me a while to figure out how to do this stuff on the iPad. Cool presentation. Thank you very much. Sorry about the previous interruption. I was talking to my brother. I don't see in here, and I missed the very beginning. I don't see where, and it might be here, it might not, how this stops doxing fishermen. It seems like any way you look at it, you've got a predictable algorithm and you can tell who the fishermen are. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, that's something. So the reason why, one, I didn't have all the fishermen participate on benchmarking each session is because even if you run, I don't think that you'll be able to, because I mean with the current system right now, it's trivial to do. But with this system, like from an attacker standpoint, how would you do it?
Well, I haven't seen your algo, but I mean, it's got to be a deterministic algo, so I'll determine it.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I was going to have the fisherman session, which was determined by the fishermen. So each fisherman would have their personal private key or VRF or whatever, and so yeah, they'll send that to the other fishermen to select them into their session. And so those fishermen are the only people that know what's going to happen. And so let's say you're an attacker and you run a fisherman yourself, so you know when it's happening. Yes, you can do that, but there's also going to be a lot of other fishermen that you're not included into their sessions. And when they query your nodes, then you're going to get wrecked then you're going to get paused and burnt if you try and block everyone else except those fishermen.
Okay, well, the actual fisherman measurement requires an app key from a legitimate app, correct?
Yeah.
Well, how do these fishermen get those keys?
I mean, same way that they would right now. I mean,
well,
we could also. Oh yeah. Let me think. Well, one way is. I mean, aren't they getting them right now just from voluntary apps?
Exactly. The app has to tell the fisherman, "Here's a key. Please use it to to monitor my session." If the app's going to need to detect or some other way know how to give that key to the fisherman. I'm not trying to knock down your. It's a good idea. It's very. I mean, we're on basically the same page with all of this, but that part I don't see.
Yeah, I haven't thought about that yet. I don't have an answer for you.
That's cool. We'll work it out. Go ahead.
I want to try to understand the question better, actually, for my own understanding. You're trying to figure out if we randomly select and fisherman for a certain session, how do we deliver the app's ephemeral key to all of them? Is that the underlying problem?
No,
or it's which key do we deliver?
The key is the state key. It's the key that the app is registered with on-chain, on the state. It's not like a BRF secret key or whatever.
And then the underlying problem is then that allows these service nodes to dox the fisherman. Can you just could you go over the question? Sorry.
If I can, real quick, I'll try to summarize this. We currently, or the current model-ish, is that the fishermen imitate an app, and so that obviously, and they use the app's key in order to pretend to be that app. The way they get that key is the app hands it to the fisherman. And I'm just trying to say, okay, that's the current model. In the new model, I don't see that step occurring. How does the app know who to give his key to so that the fisherman can pretend to be the app?
So we derive the ephemeral key from the AAT, from the application's AAT.
Well, no, I think he's saying this new system. It's a lot of moving parts. So from like an application standpoint, right? You're in a session, right? And you want the fisherman to go in and grade all the nodes in your session. Because everything is so random and like all these different entropies are being passed between the fishermen, it's really hard to determine, maybe even impossible to determine what fisherman to give your application key to. Like basically, you're trying to figure out what fisherman session is in your service node session. And it's hard to do because it's like different when there's only one or two fishermen, because it's like you of course know that you should give it to that one or two fishermen. But when there's hundreds of fishermen, you really have no idea which ones are monitoring your session or not. The only thing I could think of is that a fisherman, due to economic incentives, if a fisherman doesn't have an application provided ephemeral key, then they're going to have to stake some themselves, provide themselves with a key, or else they won't get very many rewards. But that's not a fully good system, so I need to think about that more. Maybe Luis's comment about earlier about
exactly. You talked exactly the same thing. It's like the thing about melding the sessions together is what allows the application to know via the dispatch system which fisherman to give its key to. Because the only other option you have is for applications to be part of the peer-to-peer network and basically send a message to a specific peer that they can name but they don't know where he is, and then let the peer-to-peer network figure that out. And I don't think our network is built for that. Our peer-to-peer network is more built for broadcasting. So in that particular sense, that will be your alternative, but you will have to, we will have to figure out the details on how to make it possible.
I think that Luis's I think that could work, but we'll need to think about that.
Yep. Okay, I just want to jump in. So I don't have an answer or solution to this, but I understand the problem. And look, in terms of moving forward with the rest of the development or the rest of the proposal, so the rest of V1 development, or even kind of beginning to continue to review a proposal like this, it's not a blocker. But I haven't done a deep research cycle into zero knowledge myself, and as much of a buzzword as it is nowadays, I do think there might be an opportunity, especially with all the recent research, to use zero knowledge for something like this. Some of the innovations that have been coming out of zero knowledge algorithms could be interesting and exciting, but I don't know what exactly would be using.
Let me tell you something, because I already went down this rabbit hole in B0.
Okay.
This is gonna lead you. This is gonna lead you to an alternative DNS layer.
Let's do it.
Because that's where, in the end, that's where all of these discovery and identification ends up. It's like, I need to know the state because I need to know the state because I don't know the IP of this person that I need to send this message to, and that's where the shortcomings of DNS come into play. But if you had something, and again, that would mean everyone is in the same peer-to-peer network, and that's another rabbit hole. But if you had like a DNS service where with the key you could point to where the person is, then all you have to know is the key. And at that point, you will need some discovery and maybe even some address book building. But at that point, that's what needs to happen. And so the idea is, do you build DNS from scratch, or do you piggyback off the existing infrastructure?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So like how, what's the I'm new to all this. So what would be like the process for getting like this system or something similar, or like working through it and then getting it into the spec?
That's a great question. So here's the thing. We're still refining the contribution system for Pocket Network Protocol, but I think you did the right thing. You're opening issues in the Pocket Network Protocol. So I think what needs to happen is that we need to make a determination, and that's a bigger question, because the Pocket Network Protocol repo, it's the rules of the games, the rules of the protocol, independent of the implementation. So what we need to do as a community, and you as one of the first external contributors to the project, is let's determine together what contributing to that looks like, and yeah, let's do it. But for now, I think discussing these things in issues and then opening PRs to the spec is gonna be the best way forward informally. But that is a process that needs to be formalized. Daniel, you raised your hand twice. Go ahead.
The first one was from the ZK part. The second one is regarding this. The only thing I'd say is don't spend your time updating the actual specification, like so what's in the GitHub repo with all the text and the diagrams and the explanation. Don't spend too much time literally updating that and proposing a change. Even though we don't know a formal process yet, I think something like Tendermint's ADRs could be a good reference. It's how they reviewed proposals. So first they had conversations like this, then they reviewed them, and only at the very end did we actually update the document and go through all the final edits before it gets merged, if it gets merged. So the only thing I want to say is hold off on that part for now. And definitely Luis and I and the rest of the team, we will follow up with really proper guidelines of how you can do it.
Okay, sweet.
Cool, guys. Here we are, top of the hour. Really interesting conversation. It seems like the format is maturing. Thank you so much for coming. This session was recorded, including Pierre's presentation, and I'll be uploading it later to the research channel. Thanks again, Pierre, for putting in the topic. Everyone, remember to go to the agenda link that it's in the announcement and in the pin message to submit your agenda topics. Next week, we're gonna go back to B0 and do it all over again. Thanks so much for coming, guys, and I'll see you next week, okay?
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.